Hello and welcome to Be the Wolf. I am here today with Debby Meadows. She is an artist, a creative, a powerful fucking woman. And we're going to go deep into all kinds of things. We're going to talk about control. We're going to talk about freedom. We're going to talk about how to really access the depths of who you are so that you can actually create the life that you want. But the thing that you need to start doing when you want to create the life that you want is doing the things that you love. And for some of us, I know for me, and I know for Debby, we grew up feeling like those things weren't allowed. Those things were going to cause us more pain in the end, whether it be in punishment or uh, feeling ostracized or losing love, things like that. So if you've experienced, dealt with like controlling partners, controlling parents, controlling bosses, if you've dealt with feeling like you are not allowed to do the things that you want, or you really want to do them, but you always put your needs on the back burner, this episode's going to be one you're going to want to listen to. Okay, so Debby, you want to give us a brief little intro about, in your perception, who you are and what it is that you do, what it is you're here to create on this beautiful planet Earth?
Gotcha. I think that to tell you exactly who I am and what I do, I need to give you just a little bit of a backstory.
Great.
So, I was raised in rural Kentucky. I'm a Kentucky girl, if you can probably tell from the accent. And when I get close to my hometown, it gets that much thicker. Anyway, so I was raised in the Bible Belt. It was a weird situation because one of my grandfathers was a pastor, and the other owned a tavern in town. And so it was
Little
like,
dichotomy there.
it was this crazy thing. So at the age of 7, I was in music class in 3rd grade, and I kept hearing this song, John Denver's Country Roads. And it kept, like, we sang that, and it kept going around and around and around in my head. And we went to my aunt's house that night. You know, everybody knows everybody in my little hometown. You know, it's everybody hangs out with everybody's family. The church is your social construct. So we went to my aunt's house, and I remember getting up the nerve to ask her if I could play her piano because she was the church pianist at the time. And she gave me this stern look, you know, like, don't beat on it. And so I promised her I would. And I sat down, and the only way I can describe it is that when I put my hands on those keys, I felt something wake up. And I
Mm.
didn't even know what it was, right? Because I was 7. So within like 30 seconds to a minute, I started playing that song with both hands, and I just felt it and I played it. And I had no idea that was not normal until I finished playing, and I kind of turned around. I was thinking to myself, wow, I did this. And I turned around, and like every adult's jaw was on the floor. My parents were like, how did you do that? And I really had no clue. So that began my career, I guess, as a creative, and it's been a wild ride. I am a classically trained pianist. I can play just about any instrument if I just kind of sit down and mess with it for a little bit. And those two things have been a parallel in my life up until about 20 years ago. And I rose through the ranks. My talent, my gift got bigger and bigger. I eventually became a fronts person for a very large praise and worship team. I was writing the music. I was hand transposing for a 12 to 15 piece orchestra for 3 services a week. And I was doing all of that for free. I was a volunteer, but in that environment, there is so much control. So, not only of me stewarding my gift, which, you know, I really believe because I was taught that gift did not belong to me. It belonged to God or the church, religion, and that I needed to use that to the best of my ability. And boy, was I doing it. I was using it and using it. Now, that's like a double edged thing because it's something that I really loved, but it was also a lot of control. And I had no idea about boundaries. I had no idea about any kind of being true to myself or putting myself first or choosing myself. And so I was the one who kept everyone else's ecosystem alive while mine was pretty barren.
Yeah.
Debbie was pretty barren.
Yeah, let's go to this point where you're rising up the ranks and and I think probably a lot of child prodigies, a lot of children who are encouraged because they have a gift and they like their parents put them in like all the competitions and all the things. I have a similar thing, not quite as controlling as yours, but there's this place where what was it like for you to be doing this because you thought your gift belonged to God? Tell me more about like what it felt like because I mean this is before you really had deep understanding that you could even have a choice.
Mhm.
But in that time when you're moving just because this is what you're supposed to do, what did it feel like for you?
At first, it felt like at first, it felt very fulfilling. And there
Mhm.
was this anybody who is a creative, especially a musician, knows that there is this kind of ego that rises up. Like when you're on a stage in front of people and you're pouring out into the people and the people are receiving what you're giving and like you can see it makes them come alive. I became pretty addicted to that.
Mm.
Um, Even though it was controlled. Now, it was controlled so much. I mean, it was like a double I know I've said a double-edged sword, but it wasn't all horrible because you don't think it's horrible, right? It's your norm. But then there's always this like underlying kind of anxiety because you never know what they're going to want next, but you always know they're going to want more.
Mm.
Because if you have capacity for more, they're gonna suck it out of you. And it's not gonna feel like sucking it out of you. It's gonna feel like stewardship and it's gonna feel like giving. But I can tell you that when I first started, it was amazing. And a lot of it was amazing because I'm operating in my gift. I'm really good at playing music in the flow. I can make people move and I cannot explain it. I cannot explain when I'm up on a stage and I'm leading a group of people and we're in that like tight pocket where all musicians want to be. And you can see that the crowd is moving. And it was the spirit is moving, right? And that's
Oh,
what you wanted. But it's the flow. It's the flow, whether it's, in church or whether it's out of church. But there was always that underlying thing. And here's the thing, too, it had gotten when I rose to the pinnacle and we were televised, right? It had gotten to the point where I had to watch my P's and Q's. Example, my daughter, I have 3 daughters, and one of my daughters is a drummer. My kids are all very creative like me. But my middle daughter was a drummer and she became our drummer for our team. And I mean, she's good. But I sang lead vocals and I was on the keyboard and we would look at each other. She's my daughter, right? We could read each other. It was like this energetic thing that was going on. And I didn't have to nod my head. Of course, I had signals that I would give the band, but I gave her a kind of a nod one time. We just kind of looked at each other and we could just feel what each other was going to do. And it got to the point where I never knew when the other shoe was going to drop because right after that service, I came down and I was like, man, this was great. And I called into the pastor's office. We went in, and the pastor's wife was the up over me on the music. She was the head of the music, even though she couldn't read music and she couldn't play music. But we sat there, and she says to me, "Don't ever look at her like that again." I was like, "What?" So it was like this unknown, which produced kind of an anxiety that lived right along with that flow.
and so how old were you when you started to when it started to not feel like a gift anymore? Like, tell me about that point.
I was probably a junior in high school, and I wanted from the age of about 4. I knew that I wanted to be a musician. I would jump up on my bed and sing with a microphone or whatever I had to, like the
Yeah.
RGs, sugar, sugar, da 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 da, And so I would just do that from like the age of 4, and when I became like a junior in high school, that's a lot of what I was making my money because there wasn't any like digital music then.
Yes.
So I had a side gig of playing like funerals, weddings, receptions, all kinds of stuff because everybody knew in my hometown that I could play. But there came an event. Okay, so I lived in a little town called Carrollton, Kentucky. It's halfway between Louisville and Cincinnati. And Kings Island, which is a Six Flags park, it's about an hour north of Cincinnati. So, like 2.5 hours from my hometown. I get this letter in the mail between my junior and my senior year. And this letter, I have no idea to this day how they found out about me. But this letter was a job offer. I didn't have to interview for it. I didn't have to do anything for it. I just had to go and be. And I was so excited. To me, that was like making it.
Yeah.
So I came running in with this letter and I showed my mom and dad, and I'm like, Kings Island wants me. They want me. And my dad was like, nope, not going to happen. He takes the letter, tears it up, throws it in the trash. And I think that is the first crack in the facade because it was like, okay, I want to be a musician. I can do this. I know I can do this. But it was like a tether. There was only
Mhm.
as far as I could go. There was only so far. And that's how it became. And the better I got at my ability and the better I got at the flow, the tighter the control.
It's interesting because I think you and I both know there for a lot of people there's this upper limit. Like you can only get to a certain point and then your nervous system freaks out and you start to self-sabotage. And
Yes.
and so if, those of you who are listening, if you've ever like been on the verge of getting everything you want or the thing you've been working so hard for and then at the last minute it all falls to shit, you can guarantee this is the stuff that's at play. And what happens is when we're young, there's this structure, what is safe and allowed. And then we tend to recreate that over and over in our life. So it sounds like this is the point. Like you can have the gift, you can be the center of attention in the church, but only to a certain point. It's where the whip starts to crack. It's like where that like, "Oh, no, no, can't let Debbie go outside of this cage, outside of this box." So, first it's the pastor's wife, was that who it was?
Mhm.
And then it's like, oh, dad's like, "Nope, can't go beyond that." And one thing people don't realize is that those things that seem so personal at the time are really about the other person's fears and the other person's stuff. But especially when we're young, we just take it as we did something wrong. And so for you, when that started, when that control started to really ramp in and you started to see it and feel it, what kind of stories did you make up about yourself?
Oh, totally that I wasn't enough. That no matter and it even became an issue with my talent because there was always this incongruence. Like I play by ear, but I also play by sight, which is puts me outside of the norm for anybody, well, not anybody else, but for most people. And so I would hear things that in addition to what was written on the page, and my piano teacher and I got into it quite a lot because of that. But tell me your question again because I'm going off on a tangent.
I'm talking about when you started to become aware of the control and it felt like people were trying to keep you small. What were the stories? What did you start beginning
Right.
to believe about yourself and think about yourself?
So that part went really deep. And because so much of my life was controlled, like my choices, I could not make any choices for myself. I was told that if If a guy, my mom actually sat down and told me this, if a guy asks you out with your looks, you'd better go out with him because you never know if you're going to get another chance. So it was everything from what I wore to the choices I made in who I dated, the choices I made in my friends. And so I internalized all of that. I had no idea that it was them reflecting things back to me that they perceived. So I took away from that and I internalized it that one, I am bad. Two, my desires really suck. Three, I am not enough. And then it was this weird thing of I'm not enough, but I'm too much all at
Mhm.
once. So you never know. I'm not enough. I'm too much. My body is, I must be ugly if I need to go out with anybody that my mom tells me to go out with. This must be really true, you know? So I started thinking that way. And that is it was just I never had a moment's peace because my mind was always ruminating about how horrible I was.
Yeah, I can relate. I was like, for me, it's like I'm wrong, I'm broken, I'm bad. Those were the big ones.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not enough didn't come till later, till somebody gave me that language, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is the thing I felt my whole life." Um, and I've since learned some things about that, but that's for another episode. Um, Now we talk about control. So before we dive deeper into your story about your creative journey, your a lot of people have controlling families and controlling parents, and have grown up in religion. But I'd say yours was a little bit over the top, a little bit, just a little bit more than the average person. Um, can you told us a little bit about what was controlled, but as you got to be an adult, what can you tell us a little bit more about how your life was controlled by the church, by family?
Oh, yeah. So, it was this cage with gilded bars. I mean, the bars looked really shiny and they looked really good. So here I was a mom, a single mom of 3 girls. At the time, I didn't have any child support, and the church was my lifeline.
And
We
how did they even how did you end up being a single mom? How did the church react to that first?
Yeah, that opens another, Pandora's box. So, my first marriage, I married to escape my home, and we were married for 15 years. We were great creatively together, like, great. He was my best friend in the world, and then after 15 years, he came out as being gay, and even then now, I can say that I'm really glad that he had the bravery and the courage. I cannot imagine what that would have taken in that atmosphere. We are very cordial, we're both there for our kids, we're friends. But when that happened, I was blamed. And
Mm.
I already I already believed I wasn't enough. So I rebelled. And the way that I rebelled was I was like, F it. Of course, I didn't speak that way then, but I was like, F it. I'm just going to go do what I wanted to do. And that was when I met through another friend a man who I instantly felt a connection with. And up until that point in my life, I'd done everything right. I mean, I was a virgin on my wedding night. I had done everything correct in religion. At least I tried to.
Yeah.
And so the guy and I met, we slept together once. I decided I wasn't going to see him again. And which was really hard for me because of the stories that my mom had told me, but it was just he just, it was just sex. It was it. And so I he lived in Oregon actually. I flew to Oregon to see him. I came back to Kentucky, went on with my job. 6 weeks later, I'm like, "Dang, I just don't feel very good. You're pregnant." I was like, "What
God.
the F? What? This could not have so I'm just, like, freaked out about that. Well, I was on the stage then, and it was a pretty large praise and worship team, and I was on, vocals and keyboard, and I knew up on the stage it was gonna start to show, so I was like, "I'm just gonna go tell people. I'm gonna go tell the pastoral staff." So I went and sat down, and The first thing was, "Is it your ex-husband's?" I'm like, no, I don't have the equipment for that anymore, you know? So, no, it wasn't his. So, the next thing that came out of their mouth was, "Well, he may not have been God's man for you before, but he sure is now, so you're gonna marry him." I was like, "I'm not gonna marry him." Well, about 6 weeks later, he magically appeared in Kentucky, and I was forced into marrying him. Now,
Yeah.
when I say I was forced into marrying him, they didn't hold a gun up to my head or they didn't threaten me with a beating, but my family was very tight, and part of that was the control. And with my grandfather and my mom, wearing me down, "You can't do this, you gotta do this, you can't do this." It was just that was my norm, and so I can remember standing there. It was a Sunday afternoon right after church, and had morning sickness, and I was throwing up, and I threw up several times before the ceremony, but went before the ceremony, it wasn't morning sickness, it was just that I didn't wanna marry this man.
Yeah.
So, I married him because of the pressure and the control and because I had to be right. But they still after I married him, I got kicked off of the stage for a few months because I was told that sinners can't be up on the stage. So there was like this, that was where the "I'm too much and I'm not enough" thing came, because it was like no matter what I did to conform, it was just never the right thing.
Right.
It was never enough. So not only did they orchestrate that marriage, they orchestrated us moving an hour away from my family to help with this, to birth this new church, which I was really good at, right? The music part. And I trained people and I, did all the things, but the control just got tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until I'm spending almost every night at the church doing my work for free while I am living in government housing as a single mom with 3 girls with no child support, not able to make ends meet. But I was giving my service to God, right? So the control was in every single area, really, of my life because at that time, I really believed in the 10% tithe. So let's say I made about $800. I was working as a transcriptionist for physical therapy, a large physical therapy place as my main job. And like $800, well, right off the top of that, $800 every 2 weeks, raising 3 girls. You give 10% of that right off the top. But then it's not just the 10% because you want blessings. And I desperately wanted blessings. I needed blessings.
Mhm.
God, please give me blessings.
Yeah.
So I gave on top of that $200 out of every one of my checks automatically went to the church. And that was kept a record of. And if at some point I didn't pay that tithe, I was called into the pastor's office and I call it being thrown under the rug, not under the bus. It was the rug. And, ask why, where did that money go? That money has to come in. So it was, whew, if I ever wanted to walk in front of a Mack truck, it would have been then, but I didn't because of my girls.
Yeah. You know, there's something that's coming to me that's really big. I think a lot of people, there's this idea of how you have to be, how you should be. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not always like this over the top illogical things like it happens in extreme controlling religions and cults and things like that. Sometimes it's just the way of your family lore, but maybe the way your family works is a little more in line with the way the rest of society works. So it doesn't seem so out of the box. But as you're doing what giving to the church in the way that you think you're supposed to, and you're hoping for that thing in return, there's this place where it begins to affect, like you've been out of the church for a long time, but this idea that you don't get to keep your money.
Right.
And, you and I have talked about this. It's like one of these beliefs, these things like that come from the structure of how you grow up and what you experience and what you witness, and obviously what you go through as well. But you were in a community where it was like everybody makes money and then they give a bunch of it away. So what's yours is no longer yours, that you never get to actually have it. It has to be given away. How has that shown up for you in your life beyond just giving to the church?
It's been a big part, and it's been a thing that I've just recently, like recently within the past 3 to 6 months, uncovered, because I don't think healing is ever complete. We always keep healing and healing, right? But for me, I can remember my grandpa would take the whole family every weekend, like sometimes 2 or 3 times a weekend, take the whole family out to eat. And we would go out to eat. So when I became an adult, I thought that was my responsibility. So when we would go out to eat, I would pay for everybody.
Mm,
And if one of my girls had something going on or needed money, I would just throw money at them. And then I always wondered why I hardly ever had enough. So
mm,
it's that thing of, okay, he did it and he was one of my role models. And even though I'd separated from that, right? That was what was modeled for me. And so I gave that out of the goodness of my heart, but I had no idea, that I was really sabotaging myself by doing that. Now, I love my kids, but there's an opportunity there, I think, where there's a fine line between enabling and really helping out of a big jam. There's a
yeah.
big difference there. So I had to take a step back, and I have taken a step back, and really I ask myself, am I enabling this or am I giving this out of love?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really important, taking that step back. There's this moment of consciousness because I know for me, when I'm in the patterns of the old stuff of what I grew up in, there's no consciousness. The decisions are just kind of automatic. Oh, you need money, you need this, you need help. I'm just going to do it, right? You don't
Mhm.
even say, you say that I have this pain in my chest. And the next thing I know, I'm like on the internet exploring what everything is wrong with, what might be wrong with you so I can fix you. And I had no consciousness of it. Like it
Right.
just happens. And so that's one of the things we know we're in a pattern from the past. If like you don't even remember making the choice to do it, but that pause and stepping back and choosing allows you to dictate the way that your life goes. So, have you noticed a difference financially since you've stopped doing just blindly giving your money away?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so crazy. Just being just from not going out to eat and paying for everybody and then not throwing, yeah, it's like all of a sudden I have a substantial savings, you know? And at the end, it used to be at the end of the pay period, I could hardly make it through.
Yeah.
Now I have left over, and I put it in, and I'm paying off bills, and I'm doing all of this stuff, and it's just a conscious choice. And I do want to say this too, because in that step back, right? So the difference is now, before I would have just given it out, and there was always this kind of feeling inside me, like an anxiety or like a little twinge of nausea almost. Well, I had become so good at overriding. When you're raised in control like that, you become so good at overriding your intuition that you don't pay attention to those signals at all. And now, so I'm able to step back, and there's this little twinge of anxiety when I step back, and I'll
Mhm.
say, is this expansive or is it restrictive? The restrictive is the anxiety. The expansion is love, giving it with, not expecting anything in return. And it's made such a difference in learning to trust my own self.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Well, and that's such a simple thing, right? Is it expansive or contractive? Is it
Right.
expansive or restrictive? Just as a no. And one of the things I've noticed with my clients, a lot of times because the control or the trauma was so deep, that things that feel expansive to their soul feel contractive and restrictive in their being. It's like your soul wants it, your soul is screaming for it. But all this past patterning comes with so much like anxiety and fear. Do you notice there's a difference between that kind of anxiety and the kind of anxiety that's like, hey, no, I shouldn't do this?
Yeah, totally. The anxiety that I'm not supposed to do it is like a it's I can tell you it's different. I feel it in different parts of my body.
Mm,
So the anxiety that I'm not supposed to do it is up in my chest and my chest gets really tight. The little bit of anxiety that I should do it, and it's like this is crazy. I should do this. This is crazy, but it's like anxiety almost accompanied with a little feeling of giddiness. And it
mm.
sounds deeper, you know? So I think just paying attention to where it sits in the body and how it really feels is very important.
Yeah. For me, the anxiety that's like keeping me from the thing that my soul wants is very frenetic. It's like, and the anxiety that's like, don't you dare do that is like deep in my body and my belly. And it's like, it's totally different. It's like, it's almost like the one where I need to do it is a hollow anxiety, and the other one is that's like, this is dangerous for real, is a really rich embodied anxiety
Mhm.
for me. So as your intuition started to come online, like it's always there, but as you started to notice it, right? And we always know that the intuition and the soul's gonna, it's gonna tap, it's gonna whisper first, and then it's gonna speak, and then it's gonna scream, and then it's gonna hit you upside the head with like 20 baseball bats. Um, tell me about that journey of coming back into trusting your intuition and yeah, and how that related to music as well.
So I left the church at 40 and I had it was a miraculous thing actually. There were a lot of cracks in the facade though. It had gotten to the point where I started to realize I felt like kind of a cash cow. And let me explain that term. Because I was so good at what I did, the admin or pastoral staff, whatever you want to call it, would ask me on a certain Sunday to play, play giving music, right? Or
Mm,
we need something, so play giving music. And man, I would give it my all, and like the offering plates would come in, and it would be like 3 or 4 times what it was before, because I was so good at moving in the flow. So the cracks in the facade had already started. I didn't like who I was in the mirror from the beginning because I had internalized all of this stuff, but it just kept getting worse and worse until I couldn't hardly look at myself in the mirror at all. And the separation was a little traumatic, but it was the very first time in my life where I actually chose myself for the very first time.
what did
And
that feel like?
um oh gosh, it fills your whole body. It's like it fills your whole body with being proud of yourself and this feeling that, "Oh my god, I just really do that? I cannot believe I really just did that." And then you get in the car and you're like, "Yes, I really just did that." You know? I chose myself for the first time. But even in the separation from the church, I'd like to tell you that everything was great after that, but everything wasn't great after that because it was still the same patterning. I still had the same thoughts. I had just separated from religion. So it's taken a good while for me to be able to identify that there even was a pattern in my
Mhm.
life, identify that the ways that I have sabotaged myself. And this is a big deal that I could trust what I heard because that trust signal, like we talked about the intuition, was overridden so much that it just took practice. I've always been able to hear it. I just always overrode it, you know? So
Yeah.
it's that being able to readjust that signal to be able to tune into that and really listen to it.
Yeah, I think there's this alignment with the truth that happens, right? When to give up your autonomy to control, and obviously this happened to most of us when we were very young. So,
Mhm.
it's not we made good choices at the time, right? It's like I either conform or whenever things might happen to a poor little child who doesn't conform in a very controlling environment. I know for me, it was a lot of physical abuse, amongst other things. But when that is the place, when you're young and it's a good choice, and we keep moving forward and we're making that choice again, like there becomes this upside down thing where to survive, you have to convince yourself that their way is the right way. And
Yeah.
so you've brainwashed yourself into believing that your intuition is the wrong thing. So to undo that is really, it's one, I mean, for me, it was one of the most challenging things. And because it's like, oh, if I lean into my intuition, then there's all these consequences come because they're not there. The other people aren't going to like it. And so whether it's physical, whether it's emotional or whatever it might be, but at a point it becomes a perceived threat and not a real threat. But you made a really good point when you talked about you left the religion, but all the patterns were still there. And I think this is something so many of us struggle with is we get rid of the outside thing. This relationship, this job, this business, this religion is shit. It's the worst. And once I'm free of it, everything's going to be great.
Hmm.
And by getting rid of the toxic thing, you give yourself space. There is a huge benefit. I don't want to say like hang on to the toxic things for like, but that you give yourself space to breathe and see. But you have to understand that the reason you were still in the thing was because of the stuff that was going on internally. And so, what were some of the things that for you were still there, even though you left the religion?
Well, after I got out, I was just on autopilot for a while. And I had gone to college, so that took up a lot of my time. The biggest thing was the fear that I was going to either be struck by lightning or go to hell immediately in a handbasket, you know,
Mm, mhm,
because it's that the whole thing is fear based. It was never love based. It was said that it was love based, but it wasn't. It was fear. And so fear had, I did just about everything out of fear. I was really drawn to meditation. I can't even tell you how long it took me just to be able to sit quietly and meditate without feeling like I was going to be struck by lightning.
mhm,
Or they teach that they call it the forsaking of yourself. And it's given with the story of like red hot coals all being together, right? Well, when you remove one of those coals, it's not red hot anymore. It eventually dies out. And so that's what they teach. So you have to keep coming. You have to keep assembling yourself together with each other because if you don't, you're going to die. Your coal is going to die off. So that took a long time for me. I
mhm,
guess like even it's and I want people to understand that it's not just leaving the church for me. It was my whole world. It was
yeah,
my social construct. It was my family, it was my friends, and I lost a lot when I left as far as family. I lost my mom and I lost my brother because they made a choice. But what I gained, oh my God, is just so much more. But when I first got out, and I've talked to a lot of people who have left religious situations like this, and that's the big thing. The big thing is that if I even read this or if I even yoga, oh my gosh, I can remember the first intuitive art retreat that I went to. And I had not been out of the church very long. But the gist was you listen, you go into this meditation and you listen to what you receive, and that's what you base your painting off of, right? That's the bottom layer. And you keep building on that. I knew. I just knew. I knew I was going to like just disintegrate in flames the whole time. I just sat there, just scared to death because I knew that I was just going to go straight to hell. And it did not happen, right?
yeah,
And so it's just this little, it's like a clenching of sorts. And every choice, every situation, every day, you're confronted with just the basics of life that people take for granted. And when you have been controlled your whole life, decision fatigue, that was a big thing for me because I had not ever been allowed to make any decisions. And now all of a sudden I'm making all of my decisions about what I wear, who I associate with, what I eat, when I eat. There's a big thing with fasting in the church, at least, where we were, who you hang out with, everything, your belief system. It's not in a box anymore. So what do you believe? There's just a lot of things that you have to navigate that you navigate through. A
Yeah.
lot of deep stuff.
And I want to take a moment and just acknowledge how brave you are because, it may sound like a small thing. Oh, whatever. She was in an intuitive painting class and she like had this fear like she was going to be struck down by lightning or go up in flames. But for the average person, what that feels like is imagine you are in the middle of the freeway painting a painting and you just have to hope that none of the cars hit you. But yet you can't move from that middle of the freeway and all the cars are going by at 70 miles an hour and you just have to hope that they swerve enough to, and that's what it feels like to the nervous system. And obviously now it's like a silly thing, like that's not going to happen, and the average person knows that if you're doing this intuitive painting thing where you're listening to your inner self, you're not going to be struck down by lightning. But that's not what the nervous system feels. It feels like you're literally sitting on a busy highway trying to make a painting. And so for the creatives particularly, for those of you who have, and a lot of creatives come from traumatic backgrounds, controlling backgrounds, and is like the way that they could express, maybe because they couldn't do it with their words, that feeling to actually try and create from that feeling. What are you actually creating for you and your experience as your system got more acclimated and became less in fear? What changed in your creativity around painting per se?
It's like, in listening to what you were saying before about the, standing in the middle of the highway was for me being, and this is gonna sound so crazy. It was for me being able to paint in the flow like I played the piano in a flow without having a panic attack.
Mm,
Because seriously, after I left the church, I was in college, right? And that's when I got a degree in art. I left music. Music, I couldn't even touch it. I didn't even touch music for almost 20 years. Nothing. There are people in my life, there have been spouses in my life who never heard me play, who never, people just don't even know. There's a lot of people that don't even know because I just hit that part of my life, but it's that ability to play from that true, authentic flow instead of feeling like you're going to have a panic attack because you're being controlled or because you're in fear that you're going to get caught at something that you're doing wrong.
yeah. And what, in your opinion, the quality of your painting when you started being able to access the flow?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. So totally unbelievable. So even when I graduated with my degree in fine arts and became an arts teacher, I've done that for years and years. I was into the perfectionist game. And so for years, I would create like teacher examples for students. This
Mm,
is what this is supposed to look like. Here's an example, blah, blah, blah. I would do that, but I never allowed myself to paint for me.
yeah.
That's the big thing. I could paint for anybody else, but I never allowed it. And if it wasn't of a degree quality, like this portrait that people look at and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Or like the Mona Lisa or whatever it is. I was such a perfectionist there that I didn't even paint at all. And so eventually I began to let go a little more and a little more and a little more and trust myself. And now let me tell you what, I have an alive painting practice. It's a practice, a music practice for me, not for anybody else, and that's the big thing. My music gives me life.
Yeah.
So does my art. I love what I do, and I don't need anybody to tell me I'm good. I don't need anybody to tell me it's this or it's that because it gives me life.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing.
And that's the difference, right? Like people wonder, like a lot of artists wonder, like, oh, am I still going to be able to paint? Am I still going to be able to make great art if I heal?
Mhm.
And what it does is, and Rick Rubin talks a lot about this, is he talks about how you have to make it for you. Like if you make it for you, that's when it's good. Once you like it, that's when it's good. And the best artists, when they can get to that place, the quality, and you can feel the frequency. Like as an artist myself in my photography career, it's like there is a very distinct difference between the art I made that was for me and the art I made to try to make everybody else happy. Or people would see it and I think they're going to be like they're gonna think this and da da da. Because I had that thing too. My dad was an artist, also the same thing. It's like I didn't spend a lot of time with my dad in my life, but when he passed and we cleaned out his shop, I expected to see so much art, but there wasn't. You know what there was? Lots of tracings
Mm.
of other art. And so it was really interesting to be like, here was this person who was an artist their whole life and they had a sign painting business. And he had talked to me about how um, how he had been a perfectionist in his art. And when I first met him, I was 28 and I asked him if he would paint me a painting. And after 10 years, I gave up like asking. But the reason he never painted is because he was so afraid that it wouldn't be perfect. And so you can't tap into your actual creativity when you're trying to make it perfect because perfect is somebody else's standard. It doesn't actually come from you. Now, you have you're opening back into music, you're also writing. Tell us, well, first, before we go into that, tell us what are the things that have helped you break through into being able to access your creative flow again and being able to actually live a life where you're not in constant fear of being burned in hell or lightning coming down to strike you.
I think the baby step for me was actually doing what I loved and all what I've always wanted to do and giving my own self permission. I learned that, when you meditate, you can still access the flow.
Yeah.
And it's not in a religious thing. I can meditate anywhere. I could meditate right here and I could access the flow. That was the biggest thing for me. Because in religion, you're taught that, you have to keep that to be able to keep that coal hot, you have to put it in with everybody else's, and that's not true. And that was the biggest thing for me. I think the first time that I really and it wasn't a big like meditation, I really just got serious about stopping my thoughts and just being still. And I was out in nature. Nature has always been a big, big healer for me. And I was just sitting out there and I felt it. It was the flow. I felt it open up inside me and I just started to cry. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same thing that I felt in the church when I was playing music and it came out of me. How is this even possible? And just that small step of giving myself permission to do what I really love, yoga. You're taught in the church that if you do yoga, you're going to go straight to hell. There's demons associated with it. And there's all kinds of things, all kinds of things. Um, but it's that pull of what I really loved. And little by little, here's one thing I did too. I reached outside of myself because I knew that I couldn't do this alone.
Hmm.
And so in my practice, I would say I have, several questions that I ask myself every time, every morning. And I've been doing this for like however many years. Who am I? Where am I supposed to go? And what am I supposed to say? And just those three questions have really formed the foundational basis of who Debbie is right now, along with when you're open to receive. The universe or source or whoever and whatever you want to call it will place people and mentors in your path that will help you further your journey further more than you ever could on your own. And that's exactly what's happened to me. I've
Wow.
just been open. I've been open and I've been receptive, and I get to decide that, right? It's different than in the church because I decide if somebody resonates with me. I decide if I want to draw close to them or if I want to go somewhere else and have somebody else help me. But it's been in that open and receptive, expansive place where the universe has put people in my path that have really helped me get to the root of a lot of why I do what I do.
Yeah, beautiful. So you're writing a book right now, and you made a really funny discovery. And so talk to us about that and how people can get in touch with you, how people can get on your newsletter and sign up for the things that you have. And then, but when you're done with that, I'll have one more question to ask.
Okay. I'm so excited about this. So I had 5 months ago, let's go back 5 years ago, and I'll make this the condensed Reader's Digest version. So 5 years ago, I started working for a university, and I've done remote teaching. I stepped out of brick and mortar, and I'm teaching all remotely now. And so, in doing that, with my desk set up and the different places that I've taught from, I have a lot of freedom of movement in that, right? And I started experiencing this pain in my neck and my shoulders. And I went to doctors and they were like, it's just the way you have your desk set up. And so for years, for 5 years, I wore patches, I did things. Well, this last summer, it got really bad. I went to urgent care because I was having these muscle spasms. It turns out that I had something called, after they did like the x rays and the MRIs and all of that, something called cervical myelopathy, which is where your vertebra press on your spinal cord and interrupts the signals from the spinal cord, and it interrupts the flow of the spinal fluid. And I had started to have some really bad balance issues. I couldn't draw anymore. I couldn't play the piano. I had really a lot of trouble typing, even on a laptop or on a computer. And it got to where right before I had to have surgery, I elected to have the surgery. So anyway, I had a cervical fusion, C3 to T1, which is all of my neck. I am partially bionic now. That's what I tell everybody. And so in my healing, I'm here in a condo all by myself. I'm in a recliner. When you have nothing to do and nowhere to go, your mind does a lot of things.
Yep.
And your body can't run, you can't run. I watched a lot of YouTube. And this is the universe. I'm telling you, this is divine intervention. The universe served me Steve Perry from Journey, one of the most prolific voices of all time. And Steve Perry really never did it for me. I like their music. He was just a guy. And I saw him on a video, and it was like something deep dropped down in me because he was talking about how big he was. And he said, I just want to be successful, but I'm no different than anybody else. I live just like you do. And it was his humbleness. And I thought, wow, I'm gonna research this guy a little bit. And the more I researched his life, the more I saw a mirror of my own in a different way. And so I came up with an archetypal framework. It just dropped down into me. I'm just telling you. It's an archetypal framework based on Steve Perry's choice to step away after burnout and save himself. There are four phases in this, like there are four seasons. It's built on the archetype of the wounded healer that Jung wrote about. And the story of Chiron, the wounded healer, he was a centaur and he was like the most prolific healer of all time. And he was accidentally shot with a poisoned arrow. He wasn't like most centaurs. Most centaurs were rowdy and drunk and all of this thing. He wasn't like that. He was very wise and he was a healer. Well, what happened was he was accidentally shot with a poison arrow, and because he was partially a god, he couldn't die, but he couldn't be healed. Now, this is where I differ from the story because I believe and I know from my own journey that you can be healed and you can heal and grow in certain areas wherever you're open and receptive to it. But that came from the story of Chiron was the wound becomes the cure.
Mhm.
And in Steve Perry, the wound becomes the cure. He found himself through the wound. I found myself through my wounds too. And so I started seeing a parallax. Parallax is if you and I look at the sun right now, you're in California, I'm in Kentucky. If we look at the sun or we look at something in the sky, we can both see it, right? But it looks different for each of us. You can do the same exact thing by closing one eye and then
Mhm.
at through another eye. You see the same thing, but it's from a lens of different people. And so I have written a book. It's actually, I'm in the active process of writing it right now. I'm like halfway through it. And I release a chapter a week on Substack. I've gained a pretty good following, and the following is not the thing. I'm coming at this from a real place of love. And I just want to share what I know and what I've been through in hopes that somebody that's burnt out, whether you're a creative or not a creative, if you're in burnout, you're in burnout. No matter if you're an academic or a creative or a healthcare worker or a pastor or a teacher, whoever you are, you can choose yourself. And that's the most brave thing that you're ever going to do. And so, yeah, drop a chapter a week. I have outlined all of this and it's there on Substack. So,
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. And how do they look you up on Substack?
it's Debbie Meadows, Debbie with a Y, Debby, debbymeadows.substack.com. And it's called True Threshold. And that's for a couple of different reasons. Because in stepping into this, I'm stepping into more of my authenticity, more of my truth. And it's a threshold, right? I'm stepping over the threshold and putting my story out there, becoming visible, becoming seen to help other people.
Good. Good. And they can follow you on social media. How do they find you on social media?
Yeah. So on social media, I am Debby Meadows Studio. Debby Meadows Studio, Debbie with a Y. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all the things.
You're on all the things. Nice.
Yay!
Um, Now, before I ask you the ultimate end all be all question of this podcast, you recently, those of you that have listening know I do a lot of fire walking, and you recently did your first fire walk with me. Do you want to,
Oh,
do you want to, the little snippet about what that was like for you?
yeah. I seriously, I'm going to tell you two things about that. Number one, I was really convinced that this cervical fusion surgery had done me in for good. Like it had had its way with me and my body was never going to be the same. And so, how many fire walks have I told you that I was coming to? Like three now, I think. And I like would chicken out. The couple of weeks leading up to this fire walk, I'm telling you, I had a lot of self talk. And I had decided that I was going to go. I didn't know if my body was going to be able to do all the things. But let me tell you what, when you're open and you're receptive and you're in that frame of mind, when you go to an event like this, it will reveal things that you have previously covered up just because you're open. It will burn away fears. That's one of the biggest things. Burning away the fear.
Yeah.
And then actually, the firewalk is the culmination, right? If I can do all of the things that I did at this weekend and I can walk on fire in my bare feet as many times as I want, I am unstoppable. And I
Yeah.
proved that to myself. So if you're on the fence, oh my gosh, I recommend every single person do a fire walk. Every single person do a fire walk. You'll walk out of there changed.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Debbie, what does being the wolf mean to you? What does be the wolf mean to you?
Being the wolf means that I am all of me and I'm comfortable in all of me and I trust all of me. Because whenever people are in their true, authentic self, you're in alignment without even trying to be in alignment. And that's when things happen.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie, for sharing the essence of you, who you are, and your story with all of us. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too. Love you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And everybody, remember when you step into the essence of you, humanity evolves. We'll see you next time on Be the Wolf. Bye, everyone.
Bye.